Oh yeah, the phone was gone.
We're about to go, guys.
All right.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another great edition. Well, we hope it's a great edition. Welcome to another episode of the Sports Junkies. I'm Thomas Bookwalter. Guys, there is a lot of stuff going on in sports at this time of year. It's great. We got baseball starting up. We got the NCAA tournament just finished up. We got the NFL draft, and of course, the fans are having fun themselves playing their own sports. And of course, I'm talking about fantasy sports, and more in particular, that's what this show is going to be about. Fantasy baseball. And fantasy baseball is a lot of fun. I play it. And before we get into it, I should probably introduce the other guys. That would help. Got the rest of the guys here. Ben Baker, of course, as usual. And coming back to the show, we called him up from the Sports Junkies minor leagues to be with us again today. John Roberts. John, welcome back,
Thomas.
man.
Thanks, Thomas.
We usually reserve calls for September, but we made a special exception.
Well, no, that's baseball's rules. Sports Junkies have
Oh.
different rules. We can call anybody up anytime, see.
Oh, okay.
We can expand our
Fair
roster
enough.
at any time.
It's my benefit. It works to my benefit.
Exactly. Ours too, definitely. Especially when we're talking about fantasy baseball, which is something you know a lot about. In fact, John has his own fantasy baseball website. So go ahead, John. Why don't you tell us about it?
I do, Thomas. I've been into NL. Actually, Ben got me into National League Fantasy Baseball.
I knew Ben had a part in it somewhere.
So a couple years ago, I started NLFantasyBaseball.com, which basically has player rankings, projections, and just general news about National League Fantasy Baseball. I've been doing it this is the start of my second year. I do it with a couple other buddies, so it's been pretty popular, getting a lot of hits, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of work. But
Now, why did you choose only National League?
well, growing up in the Bay Area, I was pretty much strictly a Giants fan, and
That's why you fit so well with this show.
I like it because you really get to know every National League team's roster. You know the stars, and you know the players that are maybe going to make the team, maybe not going to make the team. And I like having to not just pick all the superstars for my fantasy team. I like really having to dig deep and find out who's going to be that fourth starter, that fifth starter, who's going to win the left field job, who's going to get sent, you know.
Well, and to that, I mean, like you were just telling me before we went on the air, your last pick in one of your drafts was Emmanuel Burris.
Yeah,
Now, and he's probably going to be obviously starting second baseman for the Giants to open the year because Sanchez is on the DL. Now, I mean, this is obviously, if you're in a regular, in an all Major League Baseball universe, you're going with A-Rod, you're going with Matt Kemp, and you're like, Emmanuel Burris, are you kidding me? So that's actually a very interesting move,
I like having to stay up to date on everything going on, so.
Well, plus, and Ben, I think you'd agree with it. I mean, when you focus on one league, you get to know those players better in your stats, and you're not going, okay, well, wait, how does he compare to these five guys with the Yankees, and that kind of.
Yeah, for better or for worse, sometimes it gets pretty excruciating.
Yeah.
You got that fifth outfielder on your team who's nursing an injured earlobe.
The rosters are just as deep. You're halfway through the
earlobe.
It happens. There's bad piercings and stuff.
Okay.
I've never done it myself, so.
Yeah, Thomas, I actually have a guy on my team, Corey Hart, who a week before the season was supposed to start was in the weight room lifting weights and dropped the bar on his ear while he was bench pressing. So he needs eight stitches on his ear. Talk about ear injuries. It does happen.
And I heard you were thinking it couldn't happen.
It does happen.
All right, well, as we continue with our fantasy baseball theme, why don't we let's talk about the different types of leagues and which ones we all like.
Yeah.
I mean, as you guys, and please, you guys are the fantasy experts, so let me know if I leave any out here. But
for sure.
As far as there's head-to-head, which I think a lot of people, there's definitely head-to-head, rotisserie, points. There's auction leagues. Keeper leagues, which is an interesting. I've never done that, but that's an interesting one. Yeah. And of course, there's the NL and AL only leagues, which you can also combine with head-to-head or rotisserie. So I mean, when you look at these kinds of leagues, let's start with Ben. What do you kind of? Which ones do you kind of like?
Well, just as you were going over it, I had a funny little quick backstory. A lot of people don't know this, but rotisserie leagues are called rotisserie leagues because the guys who started it used to meet at a rotisserie chicken place and talk baseball, and. That's the backstory.
Yeah, because I was getting about that. Yeah.
Great.
But that actually also happens to be one of my favorite leagues. Head-to-head gives you this it's kind of a cool thing, especially if you're good buddies with the people in your league, because every week it's like you're taking on a different buddy.
Yeah, it's like a new season. That's more of a football thing, but it's kind of transformed into baseball to the head-to-head. It works better with football.
Yeah.
Because everybody has one game a week.
Right.
Where baseball, it's kind of different. Baseball is usually rotisserie is kind of the standard
You think so?
baseball
Okay.
format.
Because I'll
but,
be honest, I've mostly played head-to-head with baseball.
Oh yeah, I mean it's
I
definitely
haven't
more
really played
popular than it
rotisserie,
used
yeah.
to be, but rotisserie is kind of the more common baseball
Well,
where
what?
head-to-head.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd say probably the biggest difference between head-to-head and rotisserie, unless your league makes changes to accompany this, is you can stream pitchers per week.
Yeah.
So, if there's a guy who gets a start on a Monday and then a Saturday or a Tuesday and a Sunday, or just a Monday and a Sunday, you get 2 starts for that guy in that 1 week. Whereas rotisserie, it's all accumulated throughout the season. If a pitcher makes 30 starts, that's how many he's going to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, does rotisserie have, when you mentioned the pitching stats, does rotisserie have the same thing the head-to-head has where, the minimum innings pitched thing where you got to have the...
Well, head-to-head doesn't usually have a restriction on innings pitched.
Some leagues
Some
will
they
have a
do.
minimum.
Some they do.
That's so you
Minimum.
don't...
Rotisserie usually has a maximum. There'll be like
Okay.
1,300 innings pitched for your entire pitching staff. That way you can't just load up on pitching and try to win the wins and strikeouts categories.
Right. Well, Ben, tell us a little about auction leagues, because I know you keep telling me you've played a few of those. How do those get set up?
Well, actually, just one. I did it last year, and it was pretty fun. The idea is you get, it's a base salary of course, fake money, and
Darn.
yeah.
It's like Monopoly.
I think typically it's something like $260 for a 23-man team, somewhere around there. And so you get to bid maybe, about $10, $11 per player. Now, of course, superstars, people just start bidding and they get out of control,
Pujols can get up to $50 or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. You get some just,
1/5 of your
insane
cash.
money get out there.
Matt Kemp won't.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then the people who get a little too irrational really get burned because halfway through the draft, they've already spent their whole roster. And, they, at least in the league I was in, it actually sets it up so that, if you've only got $13 left and you need to fill 13 spots, you're only allowed to bid $1 per player.
Yeah.
And that really screws you over because you're like, oh, there's that guy. No, I only
Yeah,
got $1.
in an auction league, it's best not to fall in love with a certain player.
Right.
Instead, you're just looking for good value on every pick. If you think a guy is going for $5 less than he should, bid on him.
Which is really what you should be going for in a snake draft, which is the sort of slang term for regular drafts. And
Kind of a standard now, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say you shouldn't fall in love with a player. For an auction league, I would think it's probably a good fantasy rule in general.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
I mean, you don't want to. Yeah. But speaking of falling in love with a player, what about keeper leagues? Now, the thing is, to me, a keeper league sounds very cool because you like a guy, you can keep him into the next season.
Yeah.
But that does carry some risk, doesn't it? I mean,
it definitely
to keep
does.
a couple of guys on, and then something happens to them where you don't know, and you can't just start over. You're stuck. That guy's on your team.
Well, especially in the league that Ben and I are in, it's a National League only keeper league.
Okay.
So the guys who had Albert Pujols on the Cardinals last year, and the guys who had Prince Fielder on
right.
Milwaukee,
Yep.
now all of a sudden Pujols and Fielder are both in the American League, and they're not useful in their National League
Or
team.
for a bench
Gaping
spot.
hole
Or
in
for
the
a
team.
bench spot. Cody
So
Ross is now on the Red Sox.
That it kind of adds a little intrigue for the National League, American League only leagues for the keepers, but I like it. It's fun. Usually, you don't get to keep your whole roster. Usually, it's 3 to 5 players that you can keep for the next season.
Okay.
So it's not like you're keeping everybody.
Right. No, I understand.
Yeah.
But you pretty much, do you decide, like, is it decided which players would be the keeper players before the draft, or do you do that after the draft?
Usually a week before the draft, and then the way it works is your first 4 rounds of picks are order determined. So
Okay.
your keepers are your first, second, third, and fourth round pick.
Okay.
So basically your first pick of your draft is going to be your 5th round pick. That's how it works.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. Now let's go into. I do want to go into the stats that are that are good for fantasy. Before we do that, since you just mentioned we just talked about drafts, let's go into drafts for a minute. Actually, before we do that, what do you think to you guys? What's the best type of league? Real quick.
What do you think, Ben?
I prefer rotisserie over head-to-head. Maybe I'll say I've only had a small sample size of auctions. I had a really good time doing the one I did. And I really like keeper leagues. Okay, and then also...
they all seem to have advantages and disadvantages,
Keeper leagues are fun. You kind of get to it's a reason to come back to that same league. And,
Right.
and usually the rest of the players in the league feel the same way, so there's that camaraderie.
Yeah.
And then NLA only, it's got its ups and downs, It's great, in that You're going to get to know these players really well. You're going to get
But
yourselves
like
in some really
the
interesting
big two
situations.
Fish, the big fish leave for the other league.
Yeah.
And then you're in trouble.
Halfway through the draft, you've never heard of any of the players left. You're like, who are these guys?
Yeah, that part is rough.
Exactly. All right, well, let's go to draft strategies real quick here. And obviously, you run your own website. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts. Okay, so basically, there's the live online draft, which to me is fun because you have the little chat box and you get to talk to everybody while you draft.
That's the most common, probably.
Although I will say that I find it a little boring when you're doing that and no one's talking.
Yeah.
Come on.
Every once in a while, you'll get a very serious league.
Pick players, let's have a conversation while we do it. Jeez. But didn't that have like the league that Ben and I are in? We have a Yahoo head-to-head league.
Yeah.
And by the way, we will give updates on that during the summer since this is the Sports Junkies League.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. and by the way, guess who I'm playing in week 1?
Good luck.
Yeah, you're going to need it, not as much as me. But
You're
anyway,
going to need it.
I'm in trouble, and I know it. Anyway, no, but you got live online drafts, auto pick, which is offline. You just kind of, then the offline standard auction. First of all, to you, obviously you got the standard live draft.
Yeah.
What are some of the advantages of the other types? To you, or do you think there's any advantage to any other type?
Auto pick?
Yeah, auto pick or offline. Yeah,
if you put it on auto pick, you can go to a little birthday party or something.
Auto pick draft is for people that don't have time for whatever reason to go to the draft. And obviously the best kind of draft is when you can get 10 or 12 of your buddies together and all join one league and have a live draft at someone's house.
Yeah,
that's the funnest league than being online with people you don't really know or might not know at all. Right. But a live online draft is pretty fun too.
Well, do you find it, speaking of the people who show up, do you find it as annoying as I do when, it's like not everyone shows up.
Yeah.
And then the person that doesn't show up gets the number 1 pick or something. And they're not there, and they're getting the best players.
That's why I always try to get in money leagues where at least it's like $20 or $25, because when you're in leagues where no one's gonna join a league for $25 and not show up for the draft.
Right.
Usually.
Because honestly, Ben, you remember this. I was because I'm the commissioner of our Sports Junkie League, and I was kind of like playing it over in my brain for like a week. Someone's not going to show up. Should I set the order? And I figured, well, one disadvantage is if Ben got a bad pick, he'd be all over me. But but the other thing is I'm thinking, okay, in the end, I kept it ran because I thought that's the most fair. And only one guy was not going to be there. Everyone showed up. But do you think there's an advantage to if you know 2 or 3 people won't be there, setting a draft order?
I always like the random draft order. I like logging in 45 minutes before the draft and seeing what pick I have rather than. If you know what pick you have, you can kind of set an idea of what you want it to do.
Right.
A little more.
The
You kind of know what type of player is going to be there when you're drafting. But I always like just logging in and seeing, oh wow, I have first pick. Or this year I think I had 9th pick out of 10 teams, which I wasn't super
thrilled about.
Let me ask you, in these leagues, now speaking of drafts and the type of leagues, do you guys think it's better to have, like you said, 10 or 12, big leagues, or kind of just small with a few people?
I like the bigger leagues because of what I was talking about earlier I like having to really do a lot of research and really find the position battles and when you have 12 teams in an NL only league, by the last 2 or 3 rounds, you're digging deep.
You're digging deep, right.
But I don't know.
Now another way you can do it.
When you have to pick up Aaron Rowan or something.
Yeah. Marlins let him go, by the way.
They did, I know.
Discussed earlier
Giants
on the
paying him
jump.
$12 million.
Yeah. Giants are still paying him, exactly. Go ahead, Ben.
To probably go hang out at
Marlins
a resort
didn't want
in
him for
Florida
free.
or something.
Yeah.
If you're not, super into getting into the NL, AL only leagues, another way to get a deeper league is just a lot of teams.
Yeah.
I'm in a league where there's 20 teams, and it's not quite as deep
the playoffs?
as these. I don't.
Is that a rotisserie league or is that head-to-head?
It's head-to-head. I think it's like 8 out of 20.
It's not bad. Well, because my thing is I agree that it's fun to do the big leagues, but to me, an advantage with the small leagues is everyone's going to get a pretty good team.
Yeah.
At least when you're playing and I'm talking about when you're doing the entire Major League Baseball universe, not just one league. Everybody's going to get a pretty stacked team, so it's going to be some good matchups and going through.
It's definitely, it might be better for people who are kind of just getting into fantasy
Right,
baseball. You're going to know your players.
You want to go ahead.
Yeah, you're, someone who's who's kind of just jumping into it, you don't necessarily want to jump into a 12-team NL only league where
You get burned a little bit.
you
that
don't
way.
really
Do
know.
you remember who your first fantasy pick was ever?
Oh man, I started playing fantasy baseball with my dad through the Sporting News, I think it was. When I was really young.
Ever.
And
I remember mine. It was ridiculous.
I think I,
can't
do
remember.
actually. I think I took Albert Bell.
Ooh,
Back
okay.
back
wow.
when he was a perennial 40
Right.
home run guy with a little bit of speed. I remember having him on my team and being really excited about that.
Okay,
I don't know
well,
if he was my first pick, but he was definitely on my first team.
I can tell you my most memorable trade was when Andrew Jones was starting to have that weird struggle with his stance and couldn't hit anything, and I
Right.
traded him for Tim Lincecum as a rookie, and he finished
wow,
super strong.
Nice.
I'm
Very
most proud of that one.
nice. Yeah, I once traded. We did a switch because I was in an earlier Sports Junkie league. The host back then was a Braves fan. I got Chipper Jones. He got Eric Chavez.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, we swapped it. They both had horrible seasons. But my first ever draft pick, get ready for this, Barry Zito.
Hopefully when he was on the A's winning
Yes.
Cy Youngs.
Right, going into
Good.
the 2003 season.
All right, good.
That's why we're still sitting here.
He had just won a Cy Young, and I thought a fantasy team was like, okay, you want a team like you play on the field. I
Yeah.
didn't quite get the stats aspect of it. So I want a good left-handed starter. My first pick ever is Barry Zito.
There you
By
go.
the way, I finished 92 games out of first. Anyway.
Peter McGowan liked that pick.
I didn't even know there were
Peter
that many
McGowan
Peter
liked-
McGowan,
he
I'm
liked
sure
it.
loved
He
that pick,
applauded.
yes. And let me ask you this, Joe. Obviously with fantasy football,
Yeah.
we see a lot, like the top positions for drafting usually are quarterbacks, running backs.
yeah.
Baseball obviously is different because, different positions can put up similar numbers.
Yeah.
So what do you think is important to look for in the first pick for your first pick?
I have a strategy, and it's on my website too. I like to load up early in the draft on hitting.
Yeah.
My first 4, 5, maybe even 6 picks will all be power hitters. Guys like, it's an NL only league, so guys like Giancarlo Stanton, Andrew McCutchen, Justin
Formerly
Upton.
known, by the way, as Mike Stanton.
Mike
just in
Stanton,
case
now
you wanted-
Giancarlo.
Yeah.
I have him. Jay Bruce on the Reds, Votto.
If he's healthy, Ryan Howard.
Exactly. Guys like that who can get you home runs just because there's so few of them out there. Usually teams about halfway through the year will bring up some rookie with speed, maybe a middle infielder with speed. So you can get speed a little later, but the true 30 home run, 100 RBI type player, I like to get those guys early in the draft and wait a little bit longer for pitching. That's just my strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, go ahead, man.
I want to give John a little props here. There's something known as, and any discussion like this probably can't get by without bringing it up. It's called position scarcity.
Yeah.
At least that's one term for it, where it's, there's only so many good catchers. There's, your Brian McCanns, your Buster Posies, and so on.
Montero, and that's about it.
At least in the NL.
Yeah.
And
What happened to Giovanni Soto? But anyway, go ahead.
Injury
still out
prone.
He's still playing, but I mean, he's
very
not.
injury
Yeah.
prone.
Go ahead.
and then that's similar at other positions like second and short. There's only so many good players at each.
Yeah.
But
Especially catcher, like you were saying, especially catcher.
Right,
nowadays.
right.
Yeah.
But John, has this approach where, he's not afraid to take, I think, probably 3 outfielders in a row at the top of the draft if they're the best players on the board, regardless of position.
Yeah.
And I've started to find, sometimes I get a little too uptight about, I got to get this second baseman before all the good ones are gone.
Right.
And I end up with a really weak outfield, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that happens to me with pitchers. Because what happens is when I'm drafting, like John was saying, I try to load up on power hitters first, because that's what you want. You want the home run RBI guys.
Yeah.
Then someone takes a pitcher. I'm like, oh crap, I better grab one too.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So which brings me to my next point, Ben. When do you think generally, what round or at what point do you think pitchers should start being drafted?
Well, this is one of these things that's way easier to say than do. But, I really, as much as I can, like to just play it as a value pick. Whoever the best guy on the board is, take that.
Yeah.
But, boy, I don't think there's a guy out there who hasn't been through a draft where they said, oh, crap, I'm going to take a pitcher now.
Yeah.
Because there's too many
Well,
going
because
too
you remember,
fast.
I think it was a
Sometimes
Sports
you
Junkie
panic.
League.
Yeah.
Someone
We'll
took
panic
Verlander. I forget who in our league took Verlander. But you saw me. I had the next pick. I went, oh crap, and I grabbed Lincecum,
Yeah.
which I got.
And I remember in the chat room.
And I got criticized because, Kershaw's higher up. I'm like, Yeah, but it's not like Timmy's a bad pick. You know, he's a good pitcher. You know?
It was a stretch when you picked him.
I don't care. I got 2 minutes ago. I wanted Matt
That's
Cain
where
later,
try not to fall in love with a player comes
Right,
into.
right. Yeah, that's true. Well, plus I think my Giants loyalties were shining through a little more there with that. I didn't
You
want
picked a lot of
Kershaw.
Giants.
Yeah, what?
You picked a lot of Giants.
Talking about
I
the,
picked 2. I
Did
picked
you really only
Lincecum and
pick
Wilson.
2? Okay, I just remember them going early, and I was
Yeah,
thinking
no, I had
Wilson was a
Timmy and
stretch
Wilson.
too.
talking about the first round, you should take a picture. I've gone 2 ways, and I'm still kind of on the fence. I'm not really sure. One way I do it is I always take my first starting pitcher in the 10th round.
Okay.
I have my pitcher. I take really detailed notes. I know the order of my pitchers. I'm crossing them off, and I just take the one that's highest up in the 10th round. That has worked for me in the past. I've won leagues by doing that. Another way I do it is I take a really solid pitcher, a Lincecum or a Greinke.
Or Halliday.
Again, this is NL only.
Cliff Lee.
Yeah, Cliff Lee. I'll take one of those guys in the 4th or 5th round,
Okay.
and then I'll take my second pitcher in the 10th. And I actually did that in a league last year. I took Zach Greinke in the 5th round and ended up winning that league by taking 4 outfielders with my first 4 picks. Zach Greinke in the 5th, and then I took a speed guy. I think it was either Bourne, a speed guy with the 6th. You got to make sure you have that one speed
Right. Oh,
demon,
yeah.
D.
Oh, yeah.
Gordon,
Especially
Bourne.
stolen bases as a stat is a category.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to do it, but I definitely don't recommend loading up on starters early. Those
Yeah.
are usually the teams that are far down at the end of the season because they have
You got good
no
play-
hitting.
Well, because I think right, Ben,
Yeah.
that you noticed that mostly in fantasy baseball or even in football, the offensive numbers are the ones that'll get you most of the points.
Yeah.
Well,
In
you
most,
know,
I mean, it depends on what categories the commissioner picks. But
all the categories are weighted evenly, at least for the most part. And actually, John, I'm a guy who's done that a bunch of times. I am definitely, but I have found success actually, because I've been in a lot of leagues where I kind of bully up on pitchers. I dominate in most of the pitching categories.
It's definitely a strategy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, one thing that's consistently got me actually is batting average. It's so easy to look at the power guys and go, oh,
Yeah.
there's him, there's him.
Right.
But a lot of those guys are like 260 hitters, and they're gonna get you a ton of at bats because they're good hitters, but
Yeah.
your average is gonna stay low the whole
Okay,
time.
now see, you just brought up, Ben, an excellent point, and that segues into what I wanted to bring up next. Good job. And and by the way, real quick, John was invited to join the Sports Junkie Fantasy League. Unfortunately, how many leagues are you in?
3.
He's in 3.
I do NO only.
Yeah, he's in 3.
NO only.
He decided that was too many, and plus we're an entire Major League Baseball
Yeah.
universe league, so
I gotta
he
stay
said
true
no
to the
thanks,
roots.
but he
I
was
gotta stay
invited.
true.
Once a junkie, always a sports junkie. All right. But let's talk about, Ben, some of these stats that are used in fantasy baseball. And I guess we can start with offense. The usual stats, probably the, average, home run, RBI, on base percentage is becoming a bigger one,
yeah.
stolen bases. I mean, what are some other stats? Like you and I had this discussion on over Facebook a couple of weeks ago. What are some other stats besides those basic ones that you think people should consider?
Well,
Let's just go offense first.
Well, there's a book that I'm very fond of that I think I've turned John onto a little bit. It's called The Baseball Forecaster, and they're
it's in
all
the back
about.
of my car right now.
Yeah, see,
You didn't bring it in?
No, sorry.
but it's telling that he keeps
Too
it in
much
his car.
info. Too much info.
You got to have it handy.
TMI. No.
And so these guys who work for this book, it's there's like a staff of writers that are dedicated to finding the new important stats. And everybody's seen Moneyball now, right? That's like
Right.
This is the same kind of movement. It's these people that are constantly striving to improve the way you can predict the way players will play. And that's what every fantasy baseball player is all about. So, when you're playing, you want to get every little advantage you can get, and there are them out there. So some of the offense categories that they talk about in there, they have rankings for PX, which is like your power rating. And it's not just based on home runs or doubles, but, kind of what you should do, because, there's warning track outs, and that's almost a home run.
Yeah.
And, there's doubles in huge spacious parks that'd be home runs in others. And so there's
Right.
ratings like that will give you more of a true idea. They do a similar rating for steals. They have a contact rating, which is basically, how well you are getting the bat on the ball. and grind.
Yeah, like that stat you and I were discussing. And by the way, I guess it is possible to overthink this, but I'm kidding with stats.
It is possible.
I'm kidding. What was it? Batting average for balls in play.
Yeah, that's a great one because there's guys that are just hit by bad luck. They strike a ball right on the nails and it goes right at the shortstop.
There's also guys that will have a great batting average one year and most of their hits were little bloops over the second baseman.
Right.
So you want to make sure when you're drafting a guy for his batting average, he's actually a good hitter and just didn't get lucky one year.
Right, and see, that's the thing. I mean, I think, and Ben and I had we're having this discussion, and we got pretty into it, is that stats in general are misleading, and it's sometimes hard to know what stats to trust and what not to trust, because all stats do carry a bit of risk.
And one of the players who was, thought to get the worst luck in batting average last year, I didn't want to tell you this before our draft, but it was.
I see how you do it. I see.
Evan Longoria is poised to get a big recovery in batting average.
Then why did I pick him? No, I'm just kidding. I didn't.
Well, that would be a good pick because he hit like 240 something, I think, on the season last year.
Yeah.
But he should have, according to the book anyway, probably hit something more like 270,
check out this book.
which would have made all his peripherals go up.
It's an awesome
well,
book.
real
That's
quick,
right, I said it,
Real
peripherals.
quick, we're running out of time. John, the pitching stats, usual wins, losses, ERA, WHIP. Strikeouts, saves. I mean, are there any other stats you think people should consider with pitching?
Those are the standard ones. There are leagues that will have
pitched, maybe.
Innings pitched or K per 9, which is different than strikeouts. It's how many strikeouts you get per 9 innings.
Right.
For people who don't know what WHIP is, it's walks plus hits divided by innings pitched. It's basically the amount of base runners you allow per inning, which is why Zito's is terrible every year. So there's more batting categories.
Another knock on Zito, like we haven't had enough today.
Yeah.
Zito's like a door. It's just always the right time to knock on.
Yeah,
the standard league's going to be they call it 5x5, which is their 5 standard hitting categories in the 5 standard pitching categories.
Real quick, before we go, Ben, do you think, should people how much credence do you put on, like, whatever the site is, ESPN, Yahoo, their rankings when you're drafting?
I think it's best to take a few of them and look at what people are saying, because if you put too much into one website, they might have some sort of weird, some guy who just really shouldn't be where he is. But if you take a few other websites and try to get the best out of all of them.
Because I was wondering, I mean, we got to wrap this up, but I was kind of wondering why Miguel Cabrera was the top on Yahoo. He's the top ranked.
Yeah, it's also important to know
he had a great season, but what about Kemp? What about Braun? What about,
Yeah, Cabrera's not going to get you steals.
Right, that's true. Hey, we got to wrap this up, guys, but this was a lot of fun. And obviously, when this airs, we'll be mostly into our fantasy seasons, but it's good to know what to look for, especially with the stats and plan for next year on even football. So, great job, John. Thank you so much for coming in, and you're always invited. You know that.
Thank you.
And you're invited more than he is. Just kidding. No. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back for another episode of the Sports Junkies. See you next time.